every American should have to go through that museum because it is super powerful. So that's number one. Things you can do, go to the museum. Number two, they do a very good job of explaining that slavery and all the stuff that came after it was an economic thing. People made money off of Black folks. People in positions of power in the government then warped the economic system so that then they continued to benefit through Jim Crow and redlining and everything else. And so when you say, what do we need to do? Yeah, acknowledging it is one thing. But as I was telling a friend of mine, true reparations means that Tegan Broadwater looks at his bank account and he takes out 40% of what he has and he writes it to Brian Dixon, right? Don't ask the government to pay it, because anytime you have a third party paying things, it doesn't affect you. You go, oh, well, the government will take care of it. Well, the government is all us. So why would I give the government money and then get it back? This ain't, income tax time. No. If we to reparate,
legitimate reparations.
Correct. Legitimate reparations mean you have an emotional connection to whatever it is and you give that up. That's why Lent, if you do it correctly, is so freaking powerful for those Catholics, right? They give up something that is really meaningful to them so that they humble themselves. It's that same idea. So when you want to give me, $5.6 million, which is 40% of your total gross, then come and talk. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I would say. Anything short of that, I know it sounds horrible. Anything short of that is kind of lip service.
Look, I think it's about time we had somebody controversial on the show. Somebody with some real strong opinions, because, we never have that. But my brother that we're about to introduce you to is quite candid. And he might say things that I completely disagree with, but my opinion is not the one that counts here. The idea is we want people to bring opinions to the table that are causation for positive, impactful conversation that elicit empathy and understanding for the other side. Don't have to change your mind. Just have to understand. And my next guest pulls no punches. Great dude. Love him to death. You're going to love it too. Please help me in welcoming my next guest, Dr. Brian Dixon on the TCast.
Go AI.
It's coming anyway.
Mm-hmm. And you white guys are all over it. I tell you. Yeah, y'all are super excited. And I'm like, this boat.
Well, when BI comes up, then, there's going to be a battle there.
BI?
Yeah.
After
Black
AI.
Intelligence.
Oh. Shit. We're going to be unstoppable. Oh, man. Yeah.
That's Aryan intelligence, right? Isn't that what it stands for?
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way. It probably should be.
Well, your implication just made the idea come. So,
oh, that's funny. Well, it's one of those things where people are like, how do we stop this? And I'm like, y'all, just fucking unplug the computer, right? Call it a day. Like you can stop it. This isn't like some runaway train. Yeah, anyway, we'll probably talk about it as part of the podcast.
Yeah. It's
this whole thing makes me mad.
Well, tell me, finish. Go ahead. Are we recording?
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm just irritated because we act like we create the demons and then we act like, where the fuck did the demons come from? And I'm like, you did that, right? It's your fault.
Right.
And it's very, very clear. So yeah, I know that in this country, we have a lot of people, especially white guys. I'm going to pick on white guys a lot in this session.
Yes,
so especially white guys who don't realize that there's other people around them, who don't realize that the world is full of other folks who don't think like them. And so they just make shit up and they hope everybody's going to be excited. And then when people aren't excited, they go, oh my gosh, why don't you recognize my genius? Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jamie Dimon with the Fed. When you look at a whole bunch of stuff that's going on right now, who started it?
Yeah. Well, and
I'm just saying.
Well, my concern is that too, as soon as if I was a certain level genius and could create something amazing, then other people are going to build on what I created, which wouldn't be my intention in a conscious way. You know that everything's going to progress. But if my concern is essentially somebody's going to take it and intentionally use it for evil, that's why I worry about it being a runaway train, because all it takes is the 2% that are good enough to leverage it for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
On purpose. Mm-hmm. And we have to keep up with that in order to defend ourselves from that.
So who's leveraging it for the wrong reasons? A white guy. I mean, just look at it. I know it sounds horrible to say, but look at it, right? So I think about this system when it melted down in 2008, and they were like, "Oh my God, subprime mortgages and blah 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 blah." Who was behind all that? Right? It wasn't black folks. It was a white dude. Right.
The black folks suffered from it.
Correct. Because they started giving us loans that they knew we couldn't afford. Now, granted, there's research that talks about the racism inherent in the system. Right. But they knew, hey, here's a $500,000 house and you're making $50,000 a year. Come on. Right. Yeah. And then they set us up to fail. We fail. And then we go, oh, you should have known better. Right.
And they take the house back. And
correct. Same thing with this AI nonsense, which is, if you write a computer program, and then you put it out into the universe and you don't control the variables, keeping in mind that computer programming is a product of the human mind. So if the human mind that creates the program does not understand empathy, doesn't understand systemic racism, guess what's going to be embedded in the code?
Sure.
No empathy and systemic racism. And then we go, oh my God, these algorithms are reading people's faces wrong. Well, yeah, because a white dude thought it up. But then when we bring that up, they get very offended. Oh no, this is, race agnostic. Oh,
okay. So maybe not race agnostic, but maybe race ignorant. Would you be willing to come to meet at that point where somebody essentially is not intentionally saying, let's be exclusive, but they're saying, let's be normal. And I feel like I am normal, but they are ignorant to some of those issues. I think that's more of the problem these days.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree with you. I think the hiccup is that term ignorant for white guys is very offensive to them.
Yeah.
Well, so if somebody called you ignorant, how would you feel, Tegan?
Well, it's less offensive than calling someone a racist. So I think there's a significant difference between them. And yes, I think all white people should be open to having that conversation without being pissed off. They should be wanting to listen. That's where we're trying to go. I mean, we're doing it here. I mean, this is a good conversation, but I would much rather be ignorant than racist because I don't feel like any of my intentions. I feel like my intentions as a white guy, I get as much criticism about talking about these issues from the perspective of the ignored. And so I almost feel like I get as much crap from white folks too, that say I focus too much on trying to help the poorer minority communities, and I can only do what I can do. I can empathize, sympathize. There's a difference there too, right? I can only, based on my experience and the people I know, that's the limit in which I can work from. But if you don't have someone willing to reach out and say, what can I learn? This is what I think. How do you feel about that? And then we're never going to go anywhere.
Well, true. I think I am always shocked at how sensitive white guys are to that term, racist or racism, or being called a racist, because I mean, it really bothers y'all. Part of me is kind of like, that's really interesting, because when you're sitting in a position of privilege, you can ignore a whole bunch of stuff, right? But for whatever reason, that's a trigger for y'all. And I don't really know why.
Well, you're the psych. So don't you think that the brain typically will say that's a much more difficult and traumatic route to be awake and think about this all the time? It's easier because it's comfortable. Every once in a while, you become conscious of it, and it's kind of whimsical, and you make some amends that you feel like it's going to make you feel better. And then your mind is better off and more relaxed when you can just go back to life, which is comfortable.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, is it your natural state? You almost have to, no matter who, and that's not a white specific thing. It would be any race that's in control, that has the ability to ignore things and still their life still goes on okay.
Yes. Well, so the ability to ignore things and have your life go on okay is the definition of privilege, right? So I'm privileged at this point because I make what I make. And so as I pass someone who doesn't, if I pass somebody on the street who doesn't make as much, I can go, oh, that's too bad for that person. And then I keep walking. And that's my privilege, because I don't have to worry about the heat, because I have air conditioning. I'm not out on the street. And so the goal is I have to be cognizant and thoughtful of that privilege. And I tend to think that I am most times. I don't know that most white guys recognize that they are privileged in these race conversations, which is why I think they overreact when they hear, oh, that's really racist. And they go, oh my God, are you saying I'm a terrible person? Like, no, well, racism and being a racist is you feel that someone is less than you based off of their skin color. That's it, right?
But that's more prejudice than racism, because you're not actually taking an action to suppress them at that point.
Well, and so this is where I give my caveat to anybody that's listening. So I'm not a DEI expert. I'm sure there are like lots of nuanced anthropological definitions to all this stuff. So I'm just going to share from my lived experience. And yes, there's discrimination and prejudice and racism and all that kind of stuff. And y'all go Google the damn terms, because I'm not fixing to get into all of that. What I will say is that there is as the psych, as the person who's a purported expert in human behavior.
Yes.
One of the defense mechanisms. So a defense mechanism is anything that you do to deal with a stressor, things that make you uncomfortable. And humans tend to do two groupings of defense mechanisms. Either those defense mechanisms are mature, meaning they are very conscious. And, when something bad happens and you make a joke about it, that is a very conscious defense mechanism, because you go, oh my God, that was awful, but I'm going to make a joke about it to add some levity because otherwise I can't deal with it. Right. So that's humor is a mature defense mechanism. Denial is an immature defense mechanism. Oh, well, that couldn't be happening. And so, especially for white guys, when it comes to topics of race, they just go, nope, it's not happening. Or Obama was elected and it's all gone. And that denial is very unconscious and they don't recognize it. And so I would say to you and to all white guys is you are contributing, even right now, sitting in this room, in this very moment, in this space, you are still contributing to the differences in the races, and you're propelling that stuff unless you are actively saying, I'm against it. And that's where that whole anti-racism thing came from. Because people are like, what does it mean to be anti-racist? I was like, you have to show and then live that and say it. It's almost like you're getting married. You have to profess to the public that this is your wife.
Well, right.
So
the acknowledgement
you need to
is the part that we're missing for a lot of people. Is the acknowledgement of its existence.
But we're too far into this shit for just acknowledgement. If you're not actively hiring black folks and investing in black folks, blah, blah, blah.
I'm saying it starts with acknowledgement.
Well,
I mean, you have just so many people that are going, if you're going to be, if you're in denial, the easy answer, then you're not even acknowledging it.
Everybody, if you want to, you can go and watch a black guy get killed on YouTube. Like, you can literally see George Floyd being murdered right in front of our faces. If that doesn't compel you to do something, then I don't know what else to tell you, right?
Yeah.
We can say acknowledge, okay, but we're too far into this social experiment at this point. We know better, right? So that's why I'm just like, I'm not mad. I just want, I want people in the position of power to recognize their privilege and then try to fix it.
So what are some things that you think people could do at whatever level, even if you pick a group or a whatever, what are some things we can do to fix it for the people that are open to it?
So
because you have to start there, right? I mean, the people that are in denial are a different group.
So what do we do? So I was just recently in DC at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, right? And as we go through the different exhibits, so number one, I think every American should have to go to DC. Every American should have to go through that damn museum because it is super powerful. So that's number one. Things you can do, go to the museum. Number two, they do a very good job of explaining that slavery and all the stuff that came after it was an economic thing. People made money off of black folks. They made a lot of money off of black folks.
The Industrial Revolution was built.
Correct. Correct. And then people in positions of power in the government then warped the economic system so that then they continued to benefit through Jim Crow and redlining and everything else. And so when you say, what do we need to do? Yeah, acknowledging it is one thing. But as I was telling a friend of mine, true reparations means that Tegan Broadwater looks at his bank account and he takes out 40% of what he has and he writes it to Brian Dixon, right? Don't ask the government to pay it, because anytime you have a third party paying things, it doesn't affect you. You go, oh, well, the government will take care of it. Well, the government is all us. So why would I give the government money and then get it back? This ain't, income tax time. No. If we
legitimate reparations.
Correct. Legitimate reparations mean you have an emotional connection to whatever it is and you give that up. That's why Lent, if you do it correctly, is so freaking powerful for those Catholics, right? They give up something that is really meaningful to them so that they humble themselves. It's that same idea. So when you want to give me, $5.6 million, which is 40% of your total gross, then come and talk. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll write you a check.
So that's what I would say. Anything short of that, I know it sounds horrible. Anything short of that is kind of lip service.
So how do we get there though? Because you're basically describing a leap. Because when I say acknowledgement, I know, and I think I've talked to you about this before, so I don't mean to retread, but part of the problem really is just getting the acknowledgement. And then I know after Floyd, a lot of folks, I think you were one of them, said, I'm kind of tired of explaining what you need to do.
Yep.
So I also plead to you from the other side saying, look, I'm one of those people that's trying to put forth an effort and I still need help. Because you got to realize most of us are raised in a box, and only now, honestly, are we even to have access with internet access and the ability to see the disparities and to see the brutality and all these things. This is a new thing. So if you're a 30-year-old person that's grown up in the box and are now starting to see it, it's a complicated matter.
It is.
When you're starting from zero.
So I'm going to throw out to you, and this is an oversimplification, kind of a bastardization, but I'm going to throw out to you, let's not try to explain it morally, because that's why change doesn't happen. Let's talk about it economically. And as long as we put economics before morals, this shit will change faster than quick got ready. So one of the human behavior changes, especially if you're in a capitalistic system, I always give the example of cigarettes. So morally, we all know smoking cigarettes is bad. We know we've known that for years, right? Yet the one thing that gets cigarette use to go down is what? The price of the pack, right?
Well, and that's one of them. And the prohibition that finally started taking place too.
Yeah, they tried that. So human beings are ridiculous, right? You say don't do it, they go and do it 3 times. Hey, don't smoke weed, they go get high. Oh, don't drink. Oh, they start making their own, mash in their own, whatever, right? But yeah, they've shown that cigarette use goes down when you go up on the pack of cigarettes. And so cigarettes should be costing like $20 a pack so we can knock this shit out, because I'm tired of it. It's just hurting people. It doesn't do any good. Anyway, if you want to improve racism, let's talk economics, because it's a universal language, right?
That's a great idea. But I
by the way, your shoes are really cute. Those are nice.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Got to put it on camera.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would be, just being a devil's advocate, kind of a workaround also, because how are you going to establish an economic idea? Let's say you did. Let's say you had the idea that's like, hey, I'm proposing this, everyone votes it in, and economically it is fair, and whether there's reparation involved in it or whatever, and it gets voted through. If the purpose is still to make the money by both sides, the point is still going to exist that there's still a lack of understanding between both of the parties that are being affected. Because if you say, I got this deal for you and I take it because it's great money, it still didn't fix any of our relationship.
Tegan, I reject your hypothesis because it's hidden inside what you just said. You're making an equivocation, right? So when you said that term, both sides, and I'm here to tell you, brother, there is no both sides. And I think that's where a lot of white folks mess up, is because it's not a black and white issue. It is a weighted issue. Black people are 12% of the population. White people are, I think, like 60% of the population, I think, something like that, right? There is no both sides, right? So even if you did reparate everything, like if everybody shifted money and blah, 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 we're still 12% of the population. But this is not an equal discussion. And so I don't, to say it differently, we don't need to beg people to do the right thing. We just need to do the right thing. Because for most white folks in this country, if you fixed it, it's still, if you fix the economic part, you're still not going to fix the other part, because there's just so many of y'all. Like there's just the number of y'all I'm never going to convince the majority of y'all. I'm not even going to convince a minority of y'all. So let's skip all of that. There's no...
That's interesting. Yeah. I disagree with that hypothesis, actually.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a very simplistic view on reparation, because if everyone just started now and just started doing it regardless, then there still isn't any of the support system in the way that the system is developed. There isn't a way to just say, all right, well, this guy grew up in a poor family, a broken home and everything else. He's now 30, just got out of jail. He's been in there for 10 years, and we are giving him however much money. But we're not giving him any way to actually know how to use it for his own benefit, because the education system is set up the way it is. The judicial system still set up the way it is. So it's going to be a fleeting moment where cash exchanges hands. And I don't think it's going to fix economically anything if that's literally just an exchange of monetary value. And then it's going to, once it returns and it doesn't even out, because I don't think that itself will even it out, then we come back to the same point, and then the argument's going to be reparations don't work. You've already tried it. And because it's not just the money.
So let me clarify. You're asking an illogical system to do a logical thing, right? It is illogical to have slaves, in my opinion. It is illogical, right? And so then over the course of 300 years, the systems, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the English, blah, 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 they build a system of which we now benefit. They built an illogical system, unfair system, but it's illogical. And now we are where we are. And you're saying, I want to have a logical conclusion to this. And I'm here to tell you, I don't think there's going to be a logical conclusion that does not hurt a little bit. If you want to do a logical conclusion of, hey, let's repair this harm, it ain't going to feel nice. It's just like PT. Like if you break your bone, you don't go, oh, well, I'm going to, the orthopedist said it and I'm going to be up and run around. No, you're going to have to go through some things to get it.
But that's a good example. You hurt yourself. The PT said, then you're given the money to take care of it. Yeah, but you're not sent to the PT who will show you what actually needs to be done for it to heal properly.
Yeah.
So you're just given the money to do it. And then when that's squandered, I think it puts us in a worse situation, because there isn't any.
But again,
like I said, we don't have to be on the exact same trajectory, but I think there has to be a long-term benefit. And I think it could be a long-term disadvantage, even more so than it is, because if you do something substantial that doesn't work, the people that are in power and privilege, whoever it is, because every race and every country, whatever, is owned different slaves of different whatevers.
Yes.
Then they're just going to say, well, this doesn't work. And it's going to be however long until that's another option, because I think it has to come married with education.
So then here, I'll give a caveat. And this is what I do in my own life is if we're going to start something, anything, let's just get started on repairing economic damages in the past. Just make it easy for me to get money as a Black dude. Just make it easy for me to get money. So I'm in practice. I have a company. I have 2 companies actually that are doing fairly well. I'm busting my ass, working a whole lot. I go to the bank even now. And the forms I have to fill out are so exhausting. Literally, I just applied for a line of credit. And the shit that they ask you is so granular. It took me 3 hours just to fill out this application, right? In that 3 hours, because I know what my hourly rate is, because this is what I charge people. But let's just even be conservative. At $400 an hour, I just spent $1,200 on an application. And I would say that $1,200 could have been better spent somewhere else. And so that's what I would say to you. Now, your response, I'm going to be an asshole for a second. Your response is, well, hey, the bank has to make sure that they're, evaluating your credit worthiness. And, they don't want to take a risk and give away that money. How did they get started? Off of money from slavery. That's how banks started. And then they built all these systems to then perpetuate wealth for white people and make it very difficult for everybody else, because they know I don't have the fucking time to be applying to multiple banks and doing this shit again and again, filling out your personal financial statement. So that's what I would say to you is, hey, if you want to do one small thing, find a Black business owner that's been in business for 3 years, bootstrapping it, busting their ass, and you give them access to capital easily. I'm not saying just give me $100,000, though that would be nice, or 5.6 million would be even better. Right. But just make 40%. It easier for me so that I don't have to expend this exorbitant amount of time to get money.
And you mean easier for you than for me? Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
because it's the same form, right?
To be a little bit of an asshole, that's what you already do. You call, Bobby and you say, Bobby, hey, I have this great idea. And Bobby goes, oh, fuck yeah, Tegan, this is great. Here's, I'll invest in that. I don't have investors. Even people who are like, oh, I believe in what you're doing. I go, hey, I need this. And they go, yeah, I need to see all of your financial statements. No. See the difference, right? Do you see the difference between us? And this is real world shit.
We're just talking about, you're talking about just a situational.
I'm talking about economics.
Because if you grow up in a socioeconomically disadvantaged area, then you're not going to have the aunt, the uncle, the friend, the whoever that you can just grab money and borrow from. That's what you're talking about, essentially.
But even so, that's one layer. I'm talking about like literally right now. I'm well established in the community, I think I have something of a name. I don't know. But even now, I can't go out and find that money because I don't know who to go to, right? And I'm building a community here, and I've been here, 12, 13 years.
Yeah, so, I can't relate as much because I don't know who to go to either. I mean, I know people with money, but I wouldn't know how to necessarily, they're not just waiting to give it to me. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just inexperienced there, so I really don't. Tegan, and I have no investors in my business either.
And I understand that. But part of me says we could almost do an experiment where you write up a fake business plan and then you go and pitch it to your people and you see how fast they respond versus me.
Yeah, if we're talking banks, then I think a lot of it still is going to be discretionary because somebody is going to look at the application and still make up their mind.
And who is that? What is the demographic of that person doing the underwriting most times?
Right, of course. So that's where I think that's where the problem is, though. It's less about the application, is more just about the straight fact that somebody can still use their discretion to say yes or no. If there was a robot that said if this many answers are correct, then it's done.
But you keep forgetting that AI is still written by white dudes.
I know, that's true. That's true.
I mean, y'all are everywhere, right? So, and again, disclaimer, again, I like white people. Y'all are great. So I don't have any like personal beef at this point. I just want to be able to meet payroll and not be working all the time.
Yeah, I hear you. And I do. I remember you bringing that up too, the fact that you went to a bank and you, without disclosure, you make a substantial amount of money, and there shouldn't be a reason why a reasonable line of credit shouldn't be an easy thing to get.
Correct.
But I'm not educated that deeply either, but I find that fascinating. I do think a social experiment is in order for sure. I think so. So you call yourself an impact entrepreneur. Yes. You're a doctor of psychiatry and an impact entrepreneur. So I love that. How do you define that for yourself?
Great question. So I guess technically I am a doctor of medicine with a specialist in psychiatry, I guess is how I would say it. But so impact entrepreneur, it was one of those buzzwords that I just found. And I was like, ooh, that's really sexy.
It is cool.
Because I'm not at the time I was not a serial entrepreneur. I only had one business, which was like my private practice. But the idea of making an impact. So taking a little bit. So Black folks always say, we know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. So I don't know if you've ever heard that phraseology before. Oh yeah. Well, how many Black people are you around to?
They don't say it to me.
That is an idiom, an expression for Black folks, is we all know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. And so, that is impact to me, taking the little bit of whatever I have and then contorting it and splitting it in such a way that it can affect a larger number of people or blah, blah, blah. So that's where the impact comes from. And then the entrepreneur part, which is just, starting a business to try to make money and do something better. So impact entrepreneur is.
And part of your business ideas that I've followed along are actually impactful in themselves. They're for-profit businesses.
Oh yeah, I don't do nonprofit stuff anymore.
But they essentially are still bettering the community or bettering the world in some way, right?
Yes, correct. So ideally, with my private practice, I'm really working to improve the end user's life, the end user being a patient, right? So patients come in, they see me, I teach them stuff that I've learned, and hopefully they leave feeling better. And then that's one company. And then the next company is a practice management company, is where I run all the back office stuff, so that hopefully it's a B2B business, so that hopefully that therapist who's a small business owner can spend more time with their patients, right? So help improve their lives. And so between those two main arms of my current endeavors, hopefully we can impact both patients directly and the people who serve the patients.
Yeah. And essentially the patients, because then you don't have a person that's trying to struggle and run a business when they only studied the medicine that they're practicing.
1,000,000%. Yeah. Because compassion fatigue is the idea that in a sense you get tired of caring. I mean, I've been there multiple times where, I'm trying to be present in the moment with the patient, but I have to go pay the rent. Or, recently the fire marshal shows up because they have to check the fire extinguishers in the office, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're interrupting me. I'm like right in the middle of something. So having really good back office admin stuff is really important to running a business.
So what? And this might be this is back and way up, but what were some of your impactful experiences or lessons that you learned coming up? What essentially, and did they lead you to this path? Because tell me a little bit about what brought you to this point.
Yeah. So I don't like working for stupid people, right? And there's a whole bunch of stupid people out there. Have you heard of the Peter Principle? Oh, yeah. It's one of my, and I don't know who coined it, but the Peter Principle says that you rise to the level of your incompetence. And so quite a few people who are in charge of really big companies, they rise to that level, but they can't go any higher. So they get stuck where they are. So in other words, they'll get to a VP position, but they suck at being a CEO. And so they can never progress. Well, when I was working in companies, I had lots of middle managers and VPs who couldn't go anywhere. And so they just made the downstream people's lives living hell, right? And so that was one of the reasons why I was like, screw this shit. I can't work for somebody that is stupider than me and that I don't respect. And so, so that was one big impetus to leaving, which is kind of that noxious effect of middle management. And then vice versa. I read a quote in undergrad by Henry David Thoreau, the philosopher guy. And he said that the best thing that a man can do for his culture when he is rich is endeavor to carry out those schemes that he entertained when he was poor. And so the way I took it, poor can mean all sorts of things. It could be financially poor, emotionally poor, physically poor, blah, blah, blah. And it's that it's the idea that when you're in a state of need and you dream up these things, I'm hungry, so I dream up a way to get food to everybody. I don't have any money, so I dream up a way to make economics more fair. Well, now that I have money and I have food, I need to follow through on those dreams that I had. Because that's
a fantastic saying. I hadn't heard that. I really like that a lot.
Yeah. He was a white dude. So I guess white guys are pretty decent. Yeah.
Point. Point taken.
Point Tegan.
Gosh. Yeah. So how... I hate to stay. I know we started off on a topic that we hadn't planned on it, but I am interested to know in terms of your path and going through med school and doing all that stuff, transitioning into business and all that. Other than the banks, which we've already touched on, what kind of discrimination have you experienced during some of that process, if any? I assume you have. But,
most of it is very surreptitious. It's very hidden. So, for example, when me and one of my business partners applied for a housing loan, we got personal, each of us individually, she's a Black female, each of us individually qualified for a personal mortgage with this particular bank. And we refinanced and got our personal mortgages. We took that same application and went in together to get a commercial loan for about the same amount. And they said no, because we were going to literally buy another house and rent that out. And the bank said no. And you're like, well, what do you mean? And the bank says, oh, well, your debt to income ratio is off. And you're like, wait a minute, you just gave me a loan, a personal loan, and my debt to income ratio wasn't bad. And they're just like, sorry, that's just how the rules work. Commercial is different than residential, right? And you're like, that's bullshit. Like literally, I mean, we're buying a house in the same neighborhood where our houses were. That's nonsense. There's a school that shall not be named, but I'm sure if you can go and research it, I was highly qualified for a role. at this school for a promotion. It would be a promotion for me. And when the job came available, I number one, didn't post the job, and then didn't even tell us that they had hired somebody for the role. And so when I said, "Hey guys, that's not fair. I would like to apply for this position. I'm qualified for that role," I got lots of pushback. And let's just say that they told me I was not the right fit, even though I was never given the opportunity to actually apply, which is just blows my mind. And everybody comes up to me and they're like, "Why didn't you apply for that job?" And I'm like, "Because they didn't post it." And they were like, "Well, they're legally supposed to post it." And I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't go and fight every damn fight ever. Right. And so stuff like that. There's a lot
behind the scenes that's difficult for you to know what's going on so that you have the information to fight with.
Yeah. And so it's stuff like that. And it will almost make you feel crazy because you're like, wait, am I being paranoid? Like, is this just a me thing or blah, blah, blah? And in this case, and I won't get into all the gory details, but in this case, yes, I literally have written proof of all of these things. And I was like, oh, well, that's awkward. And so I'm just not going to work with that school any longer. Yeah. So, but yeah, it has happened. Nobody's like blatantly run up to me and called me the N-word or, done anything like that. It's all been very kind of indirect. Over the course of a lifetime, but even that can still kind of wear you down.
So does it affect your ability to have empathy for other people or get along with other people sometimes? Does it beat you down?
I would say no and yes. So no, especially when it comes to race. So, I mean, I didn't realize this. I don't know if I told you this before. But I went to school in the 80s. So in 1985, I started kindergarten, and we would get on a bus and they would truck us to the other side of town. And we went to the elementary school where the country club was, because Lufkin has a country club. I don't know if you know that, but we have a country club. And I did that for the first 5 years of my life and never thought anything of it. There was one busload of black kids that went to the school. Well, fast forward 30 years later, and I was listening to some other podcast, and they were talking about forced integration, and that there were lots of cities that struggled with integrating. And so they, with court decisions, they forced the integration.
Through the
states and local municipalities, very much like, the Little Rock Nine, where they had, the little black kids were going to go to school and they had police officers escort them into school. And it hit me, holy shit. And then I go and do the research, and Lufkin was a city that had forced integration. So that bus ride that I took, not knowing anything about it, was the product of somebody saying, yes, y'all need to have black kids on this campus. Now, I think it has fundamentally changed my life because I grew up with nothing but white folks. I mean, I didn't know any different. And they didn't treat me any different. Like, all of my teachers were like, no, get your shit together. And I have high expectations of you. And that was reinforced by my parents.
You're 20 years after the difficult part of the integration process.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating too, because that was another question I would have, is the fact that you didn't recognize it is a little bit of a sign of a little progress. So that's good. Glimmer. I mean, they're kids, but I mean, I think that's great, because I think there could be some animosity just with the fact that it's being forced to happen. I think people could push back. So it's good to hear that somewhere it's a normal experience.
Yeah. Well, I would hope that we wouldn't have to do that. And again, I don't know the actual, the technical term is milieu. It's the surrounding environment, the political environment of which that happened. Because, I'm sure the superintendent wasn't very happy, or the mayor may not have been very happy back in, 1980 or whatever it was.
It didn't affect the experience of the students who were being bussed, which is really the point.
Yeah. Well, correct. Well, yes. For those folks, what do you say to the black 35-year-old who, was sending their kid halfway across town, right? I bet they probably had.
But you didn't hear about that from your folks, or
no?
I didn't make a mention of it.
And I don't know that I specifically asked. I mean, my dad's still alive, so maybe I need to. Yeah, I'll put that on my list when I talk to him today and be
do you think that there's still? I mean, I think. I'm just going to ask you. I'm not going to give you my opinion, but a disparity in the schools, obviously, where had you been bused to your local school, and then so there is still an advantage, and perhaps even your parents thought, heck, there's a disadvantage potential, but there's also a great upside potential. And look where you are now.
Yeah.
Do you think your schooling actually had?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am here today because I got bused across town. Now, the thing is, it is not because the local school was necessarily bad, because they did redistricting when I was in 5th grade, and I had to go to my local school then. So we stopped riding the bus and we just walked down the street to the local school. And it was different because there were way more Black folks at that school. But my teachers were awesome. I don't know. I think that's where my experience gets a little bit skewed compared to experience now. I think the funding structure now is even worse than it's ever been. So yeah, I don't know how kids succeed now, but back then the disparity wasn't so bad. This is a super, racist trope. But I was the fastest kid at my white school, all 5 years. So kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade.
Way to go. Bolster the stereotype.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. I was badass. I was the fastest kid and it was awesome. And all the white kids looked up to me. And then I went to the Black school and I was the 7th fastest in my grade. Wah, wah.
Hey,
I was
but your grade, you had 1,300 people in your grade, right?
No, it wasn't that many.
Yes, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah. There you go.
7th fastest out of 1,300 is pretty good. And it's a small town. So for the people that don't know what Lufkin is, it's quite a small town.
It is. So it's a town of like 30,000 people, maybe 28 when I was growing up, 28,000 people when I was growing up.
And so there's a reasonable chance that could have been a failed experiment, which is why it may have been one of the last properly integrated cities too, right? Because it was just sort of an East Texas kind of vibe.
And let me put a really fine point on it, because I don't want people to misunderstand, because I don't know where this stuff goes out into the internet and the world. Going to a white school wasn't superior because it was white. Going to a white school was superior because it was better funded and better supported, right? And so the key is, let's find support and funding for every school commiserate to what the kids need. My parents, we were super poor and the whole 9 yards, but we made it work. There are some parents that don't have that skill set. And so those little Black kids they're going to need more in the school setting. They need smaller class sizes. They need their ADHD treated. They need free meals, because we were on free meals. They need meals to go home with them. So that's where that whole equity talk comes in.
Yeah.
Like, give kids what they need, not just what you think everybody should have.
Right. And so that was, as we talk about education, are you familiar with a lot of those things? I know you dipped your toes in some politics and stuff like that. And when they redistrict and all those things, it still seems like there's still a disparity, which there always may be, just because of the socioeconomics, as long as somebody's coming from having less and having less opportunity. But building the schools up to the point where, I liked how you said, not just giving equal access to everything across the board, but finding out what it's going to take to get the kids at a lower reading level to a higher reading level, and fund that so that we're...
Yep. So I'm a little bit of a weirdo. Yeah, I dip my toes in the politics of the school board, and I'm a weirdo when it comes to that, because the school district is kind of a company. It's kind of like a publicly owned company, but I'm still a capitalist. And my idea is, if I got in there, was to, stabilize and then treat it like a business. There are certain things that you need to do in order to be competitive, because your competitors are private schools and charter schools. And it is my belief that capitalism is not the best system, but it's the best of the worst systems. Like fascism and communism don't work very well. So capitalism is where it's at. And then we compete and don't try to do everything, because if you try to do everything, you're going to be bad at it. Well, unfortunately, that's what public schools, especially in this state, they're like, you need to do everything. And I was like, no, screw that. Let us do what we do well, which is help support kids that have learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, so on and so forth. And then if the, really well-off kids want to leave and go to private school or charter school, that's okay, because our main thing is helping those who need it the most.
And they usually do anyway.
Yeah. And there you go. And so I am actually not opposed to a multi-tiered educational system. I don't like the idea of vouchers because that's too simplistic. So I don't care for that. But we need to revamp how we pay for and structure education so the kids can go to the best place. And some kids actually, I know Tegan, this is going to be crazy to say, but some kids do need homeschool. Like some of them blossom and grow in that model, a small model where you have one teacher to 3 kids. It actually works. I saw that during the pandemic because I thought quite a few of my kids were going to like fall apart and be a hot mess.
Right.
And some of them did brilliant. Most of them actually did brilliantly. So,
yeah, I imagine introverts would be supported and, not, my son was the same way. He was the smartest kids. They always get put in a group of 5. For this semester. You're going to be grouped with all these people and we're going to work on this project. And then, he doesn't want to be in a group, but he ends up doing all the work. It's not super productive for everyone, and it makes him hate school. So that's interesting. So less about education, but in marginalized communities or socioeconomically disadvantaged communities, how are the children affected? Do you see anything that you feel like you can model in order to help the mental health, essentially, of the kids that are affected by dealing with less?
Yeah. So this is where it gets very interesting. And again, this is my personal opinion, not my professional opinion. And I give all the disclaimers, blah, blah, blah. It's not representative of my company or blah. This is just me talking.
Okay.
So number one, kids believe what they see. Okay. So I want you to keep that in mind. Kids believe what they see. And what we are showing them now is way more information, data. Just we're showing them way too much as a society. And as a result, they're struggling. They don't understand, have you heard of rage clicking? Yeah. So it's the idea that when something's not working on your phone, you hit it multiple times to try to get it to work.
Yeah. I've never coined the term that I've done. I've done that maybe a few times.
What's so funny because, how do I describe it? Kids do that a lot in all parts of their lives, right? They don't know how to tolerate frustration because they watch YouTube videos and they see people screaming, yelling, fighting, cussing, talking back, running away, doing all sorts of stuff. And kids believe what they see. And so, so you'll have a lot of kids, especially Black kids, will start to see things that are just not life. And then they get very upset if things don't go a certain way. Oh, if I don't have those kicks, then I am a bad person. If I don't have this number of friends or likes, I am a bad person. And then that manifests in other ways. And so to save our kids, to improve racism, to improve everything, I wish our kids would go back. Not go back, go forward into less. Because we can't go backwards. Let's go forward and do less. Right?
Yeah, learn how to ration the social media. And
correct.
Maybe that
limit their time, force them outside, get off the video games, or limit the video games, limit the social media. And then for necessity is the mother of invention. Let kids be bored and they will figure that shit out. So they will figure out social dynamics, blah, 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 blah. And the remnants of racism being, part of that. Like the best way to help kids not see color is you put them around everybody that's colored, Black, white, all the things. And then kids go, oh, well, that's not a big deal. And they grow up to be adults because kids believe what they see when they see gay folks, straight folks, white folks, Black folks that are just doing their due. They go, oh, well, that's totally normal. Well, yeah. So that's how you fix it.
There is a different, different is relative.
Yeah.
And you're talking about majority, minority, that's fine. But it is. I think that's the point of us sitting down too, is to just say, look, there is a level of normalcy, no matter how controversial the conversation might be. We're just trying to learn more, and hopefully people will open their eyes to realize, wow, this isn't that bad. It's engaging, even if you disagree. Nobody's trying to get. Well, you're trying to convince me to come to your side. I know, but. And
give me money, Tegan.
Oh, but there's no sides.
Yeah.
And you're right. I already owe you a crap ton of money. I already know that. Oh my gosh. So as these things that we talked about earlier, as they become politicized, and I know you've, again, have looked into some politics, but I feel like it almost turns a normal person into an automatic no when they're in a disagreement. How can we get around the politicization of a lot of these issues?
I go back to the percentage of white folks and black folks. And so when it comes to racism, when it comes to equalizing and equity and all that kind of stuff, as horrible as it sounds, this is a white person thing, right? Y'all have to do it. I mean, black folks can try, but we're not the majority and we don't write policy and blah, blah, blah. So if I were encouraging my white brethren, my white sistren, my white friends and family, number one, step up, recognize your privilege. And then number two, just spend time around other folks, because then you'll start to see the hiccups. So for example, I go to, brainstorming sessions and roundtables. And when I speak up and I go, hey, this is my experience. And they look at me and they're like, but you're a doctor. And I go, yeah. And I still couldn't get along. And they go, oh, we need to fix that. You need to talk to so-and-so. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Now, what you just did, multiply that times 5 and go find 5 other black people and tell them that too, right?
Borrowing the Band-Aid isn't necessarily a long-term solution.
Correct.
It helps you.
Correct.
But you are also a unique story because of your circumstance.
Correct. And then I can't be everywhere at once, right? And so it falls to the person that I encounter to then go and force multiply. Like go to other roundtables, and when you don't see any black people there, you go, hey, where are the black people? And then when they go, oh, nobody RSVP, you go, okay, well, next time you have this, you go out, organizer, and find more black people, right? If you're on a board and there's no black people, say, hey, there's no black people. Same thing with women. If there's no women, say, hey, we need women. Because, so that's how.
You need perspectives anyway. If you're going to get good business ideas out on the table, you need diversity.
I completely agree.
And I also understand if you are the minority where it's less of an attractive social thing for you too. You're like, I'm going to be in a room full of 20 white guys and I'm the black guy, or I'm the one woman, or I'm the whoever. I understand how that could be a little less of an attractive endeavor. So those RSVPs probably won't come as quickly anyway. So
correct.
I do agree. An extra effort to say, hey, we really do welcome. We're actually looking even more so towards your opinion, because all we are is a bunch of dudes here of the same ilk, and we need some new ideas. So, music. So we always touch on this subject because obviously it's a passion of mine, and I think music affects everyone in so many ways. You are a vocalist.
Yeah, that's really funny that you phrase it that way. I say I sing, but I guess technically that's a vocalist.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but I'm not like you. Like you're a badass. Geez. I just dibble and dabble.
No, I think it's fabulous. And I think it's, for me, it is absolutely a mental respite. It's almost like, if you're stressed out and you go see a real inspiring movie, you walk out and you're like, wow, I burned 2 hours where I could just completely went somewhere else. And it helped me to kind of refresh my mental state. Is that something that you leverage ever in your practice?
Oh my gosh. Well, so in my practice-ish, so I don't actively like include music in the therapy or my treatment stuff. I mean, if a kid says, oh, I really like Taylor Swift or whatever, I'll be like, oh, that's great. I don't know any of her songs, because I really don't, other than
come on, man. You're the guy. You're the guy that doesn't know her?
No, I know. I know Beyonce, but so I don't actively incorporate it, but that is a thing. So music therapy is a thing. For me personally, though, like I sing in a choir, and I think choral music is it's like heavenly. It's like you connect on a whole different plane when you can make a sound that is on the same wavelength as other people, and you make chords, and it's just it's magic. That's awesome. And so it helps to sing with people who don't look like you. With different backgrounds and blah, blah, blah. And it's a universal language in a sense. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So it's a multicultural experience on your choir.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So Turtle Creek Chorale is the men's chorus over in Dallas. Gay, straight, white, black, Indian, Latino, you name it. It's men of all backgrounds. I like singing with women too. I don't know of any choirs around here where I could do that. I'm sure there is, but, that's just, you get to go and rehearse. And I like to perform, I guess, but the rehearsal to me is the most fun, because you sit around and you're learning, you're taking something physical like these little black notes on staffs, and you're somebody thought that up, and then you get to interpret it, and it's so cool.
Yeah. You're converting it.
Yeah.
I had an experience in a small town black gospel church too when I was about, I don't know, probably 21.
Were you singing about Jesus?
Well, I was at the time. So I was in a band where it was black and white mixed in a 5-piece group, and a lot of it was soul and gospel based stuff, and mixed in with some rock and stuff. But we were all working on our vocals, and we went to the singer's dad's church, man. And I showed up, I got some interesting looks at first, but overall kind of welcoming. But I think I lost my voice for a month.
Oh, easily.
Just standing next to, no mics, no nothing, just standing in the little room in the choral pews in the back, and just trying to hear yourself amidst everybody else that's able to belt like that. Man, what a lesson that was. And a cultural phenomenon for me too. I'll never forget, the experience itself. And again, everybody's really into it too. So it gave me a new perspective on singing and approaching the singing, and the inspiration behind the purpose behind what you're singing and stuff like that. So I think it's great too to mix in that kind of cultural thing, just to get a different perspective, even musically. Yep. So what do you listen to when you drive? I know it's not Taylor Swift, apparently.
No.
Do you listen to Beyonce?
Oh, all the time. Like her Renaissance album, I'm still shocked that she didn't win, I think, what album of the year? I think it went to Harry Styles, whoever that is. Yeah. Do you know who Harry Styles is?
I know who Harry Styles is, and Beyonce. I know she's got, 27 awards. She's got the record
over 30.
For the most.
Yeah, she has the most Grammys, so that's a small consolation. But she still should have won album of the year. But so even though I do not like a streaming service, they are awfully convenient. So I still pay my money to these people. Yeah, and I'm not going to disparage them because I don't know where this is going to end up. But anyway,
they pay musician peanuts. But the other option is nothing. Yeah. So I'd rather just eat peanuts than eat nothing. Right?
Eat nothing. I totally understand. Pretty and so, but I have a couple of playlists. Most of them it's kind of R&B, kind of neo soul. Okay. So, some Beyonce stuff. Aradhna is one of my new favorites, and I don't even know everything about her. Aradhna, but
is she she's a new artist?
She's been around, I think, a few years, but she's Indian, but she sings like R&B, and I'm like, what?
Love it.
Yeah, and so I like Leon Bridges. I like the way that he sings. Abraham Alexander, I like the way that he sings. And then kind of just some of the old throwback stuff. Stacey Orico. I like the boy bands of the 2000s, BB Mac and O-Town and all those guys. Yeah. And then kind of the 70s funkadelic, the
Parliament style stuff. Yes.
Rubber Man from the Springers, maybe I can't remember, the Spinners, stuff like that. So occasionally, if I'm really pissed off and irritated, I will listen to Linkin Park because they do that screaming thing.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, how do you do that? That's amazing.
But it's an emotional transfer, right? It's almost like you don't have to scream, but you can relate. Yeah. I almost have a separate, thing when I'm exercising. If I'm listening to music, it's almost like you want to have something that's driving you like that. That wouldn't necessarily be something I would play when I'm just at rest and want to listen to good music. Yeah. Not that it's not good music. It's all has its purpose, right?
It has its purpose.
So I dig that. And we have very similar tastes and stuff too. So I like, the neo soul, back into the 90s and all that stuff too.
Like Erykah Badu, I still think she's a genius. Same thing with Lauryn Hill. I'm like, wow. And Maxwell and all those guys. I love a man that can falsetto. And oh my gosh, Aaron Neville.
Oh, Aaron Neville.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love him.
I haven't heard from him in a while. Is he still putting out stuff?
I think I hope he's still alive, child. Man, God, he is magnificent.
Very unique. Yes. Again, I think there's something to be said about somebody that you hear and instantaneously know who it is.
Yep. Yeah.
Whether you're an instrumentalist or a vocalist or whatever, there's something cool about that, which is why you say not everyone's a prolific singer. Yep. But if they're recognizable and their style is really cool, then that can mean everything.
This is where I feel lucky to be alive at this point in the human experiment, right? Because I got to learn Aaron Neville and hear Karen Carpenter and Linda Ronstadt, and as well as Beyonce. I mean, this is like the best of times. Yeah. And to do it in a way that's accessible. Because it used to be we had, CDs or what was that, cassette tapes before that, right?
I was buying 8 tracks and record albums. Yeah. And you'd have to save up. So I remember trying to listen for a song on rotation.
Correct.
In New York City, had a WNBC or something. I'd listen and for my favorite song to come on, I'd have to wait an hour for it to come through in rotation because I didn't have enough money to go buy the record. It's crazy how far we've gone.
Yeah. Or you would buy, I remember having it, we called it a jam box, but a boom box.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have the cord, you would have to put batteries in it. Remember D-size batteries that you have to go buy like 12 of them?
Yes. Yeah, and you use the batteries. They go in like 3 hours, they're done. And you just went and spent all kinds of money.
And now you can't even find a D battery. I don't even know that they make them anymore.
Oh,
right?
I'm sure they do. Yeah. I'm sure they do. I got some retro stuff back there. I probably need something.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, what are you working on these days? Anything new that you got going that you want to?
Yeah. So my latest thing, I'm still seeing patients, still working on practice management stuff. In the next week, I'm going to launch my new website for the lounge that I am building.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A place to chill?
Yeah. So the idea is that it is a music lounge, members only.
Am I excluded?
No. Anybody, sure. It's just membership driven. So it won't be, hey, I'm bored and I want to just drop in. You have to actually like be a member. You pay a membership. Because that's the only way to make it financially sustainable. But one of the taglines is come for a drink and be home in bed by 10, right? So come have a good time with like-minded folks, listen to really good music, and then go home. Yeah. This is not designed for, bachelorette parties and screaming and puking on the floor and being a hot mess.
For mature folks that still like to go have mature, reasonable fun.
Correct. So our target audience is like 35 to 65 kind of stuff.
I'm all over it. I fit in there.
Oh yeah. Well, everybody's like, oh my gosh. Because one of my pet peeves that pisses me off every bar that I go to, is I hate flagging down the bartender. It makes me feel like I am like this weirdo, creepy person, right? And they don't make eye contact and you don't know who's next. And I was like, screw this shit. So I'm going to design it where it's a cashless bar. And all of that information will be uploaded in your profile. So you can order before you even get there and you walk into your drink.
Dude. When is it happening?
Yeah. So I have the concept, I have the name, I have a location in mind. I'll be putting together like an investor stack and all those things in time. So I'll let you know. But the goal will be hopefully, we'll start doing a series of events for it maybe later this year.
Awesome.
And then build the physical building in the coming years.
Yeah, so send me a deck too when you get the deck put together.
Yeah, well, because again, all the white folks with money, and I need some white folks with money. So there you go.
I never ask them for it. Maybe I could just say, I know somebody that will need it. I know I need it too, but I don't know how to ask for it. But it's easier for me to ask for you than it is for me.
And that is true. And so, so I'll hook you up. But it'll be here in Fort Worth, and we're going to pioneer a new nightlife experience instead of the old stuff. COVID taught me a lot, which is old stuff is boring. Let's do some new stuff without AI. Right?
Yeah. Well, other than the fact that I can order my drink ahead of time and it's already there, that would be AI.
I don't think that's AI. That's you going,
come on. Boop. No.
Yeah.
Come on now. It's all that. Every time you pick up that phone.
AI is not so terrible, man. Okay, fine. Thanks to you.
I'm scared too.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate you burning time to come chat, and I always learn a ton from you. So
it's my pleasure. I look forward to further conversations.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
All right, brother.
Thanks.
What's it take? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? Success around the sandbox with second grade rules. A confident fake to make you do what they want when they won't. Pay the fool. A diplomatic face is the one to see you through. And don't let those bigots take you off your game, but just to let them loose. Just sit here in the front.